Alright, what's up everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about things that I wish I had known when I started programming. So a little bit about me. I'm currently a third year computer science student. When I actually entered college, I didn't have any real coding experience. I just really knew that I like to create and I like to solve problems, and I like kind of the math and the creative aspect of it. So I decided I thought it might be a good major for me, and I'm so glad that I did end up choosing it. So yeah, today we'll be talking about 4 things that I think are important to know before you start programming, or 4 things that I think I wish I had known before I started programming. Alright, so thing number 1, and this is going to be kind of controversial, but I don't think that language matters, especially when you're learning. So I'll explain a little bit. I started learning in Python, and then I moved on to Java, and now I know about 7 or 8 different languages for various different things. But when you're learning, the most important thing is you start to learn how to think like a computer scientist. So that's learning how to use variables, functions, loops, conditional statements, etc. to actually get programs to do what you want them to do. And that's going to be pretty universal across all different programming languages. So I don't really think that what language you choose initially matters. That being said, if you have very specific programming goals, like you want to be a web developer, you want to be an app developer, etc., then maybe tailor your initial language choice towards that. There's plenty of good explanation online as to what language you should learn in order to accomplish those goals. So like if you're a web developer, maybe you need to learn JavaScript, and if you want to be an application developer specifically for iOS, you start learning Swift. But for just people who want to get into coding, it doesn't really matter that much. I recommend starting with Python if you don't have any like very specific tailored path that you want to go down. That's because the syntax is significantly easier to understand, so you'll be able to actually get some of the core programming aspects like those functions and variables I was talking about earlier without having to spend too much time learning very specific syntax. It reads very similar to English, so you can look at a Python program and kind of start to understand it without any programming knowledge. The second thing is don't try and memorize. This was the first thing that I tried to do when I started getting into programming, was just try and memorize everything. Before I went to college, I was like, okay, I'm going to be a computer science student. I need to start learning how to program. So I went online and I bought like a Java Udemy course or something like that, and I decided that I was just going to learn how to program in Java by going through this course and copying the projects. So I started copying the projects, and all the while I was trying to memorize everything, all the syntax, all the classes. Like he would write a class and then I would rewrite the class 5 or 6 times on paper trying to memorize it. That completely defeats the purpose. Like I said in tip number 1, you want to be learning how to think like a computer scientist. You don't want to memorize exactly word for word what other people are doing. And no programmer out there knows all the syntax to their particular language. You're going to have like professional Python developers that are constantly looking up syntax for something that they need to achieve. That's completely normal, and kind of takes us into tip number 3, which is use your resources. I have people all the time coming to me and say like, I don't understand this, or I don't know how to do this very specific thing with my program, and I asked them, have you Googled it? Have you looked around? Because at your entry stages of programming, you're not solving any novel problem. Countless people before you have learned the basics, have started to understand this stuff and run into similar errors. Google is your best friend when you are learning how to program, and it took me a while to understand that. If you just throw your error in Google, somebody on Stack Overflow from 10 years ago has already posted about it and had it answered, and that's just the reality of it. So start to learn by just researching, Googling, looking at Stack Overflow, looking at YouTube, and just seeing what other people have done to overcome problems. More than likely you're going to find what you need somewhere on the internet, and if you don't, you can ask. There's plenty of online forums, like Stack Overflow is obviously the biggest one. Reddit has a bunch of good sub-forums for particular languages. You can go on there and actually ask your questions. So if for some reason you run into something and you're not sure how to do it, just pull up one of those forums and ask. Tip number 4 is just jump in by doing. There's plenty of beginner projects online that you can look into, but just learning and doing something is probably the best way to go about learning. You're not going to understand everything, and initially it's going to be overwhelming, but when you're able to actually get to a point where the project runs and you had figured out all the roadblocks that you encountered along the way, it's really a rewarding feeling, and one of the best ways to actually learn computer science. So yeah, those are just 4 tips that I think would have been helpful for me when I jumped into programming. Programming can definitely be overwhelming, and I'll be the first to admit that, having gone to college with very limited programming experience, but it shouldn't be avoided. And I definitely think that anyone can learn it. It's not necessarily difficult. It just does take dedication and patience and kind of flipping the switch on the mindset. It's not about memorizing, it's about learning a new way of thinking and then utilizing that to solve problems. So yeah, just go out, start learning the basics. Don't try and memorize anything. Use your resources, constantly be researching online and looking up the various errors you're most likely to run into, and then just jump in by doing. Pick some basic projects, work on them, run into errors, fix them, overcome them, continue to build, and that genuine curiosity will lead to making you a better software developer.